Welcome to my channel. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video a like up. Since Chicago Fire debuted in 2012, there have been 33 seasons and 662 episodes of the One Chicago series, Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, and Chicago Med. During all of this, we have had to reluctantly bid farewell to a number of our favorite characters. It's a sad but fair fact that the casts of all three television shows have changed since their first seasons. Actors typically have a limited amount of time with a show before feeling the need to pursue other projects. As a result, in the One Chicago reality, some characters have passed away and others have just relocated out of Chicago, which explains the actors' absences. Some of the One Chicago characters have been harder to say goodbye to than others. It's much easier to let go of those who only stuck around for a season than characters who have been around since a TV show's beginning, especially if the writers kill them off in the fictional universe. However, when a TV franchise like One Chicago lasts a long time, actor exits are to be expected. Nevertheless, I'm still holding on to hope that some departed and alive characters from Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, and Chicago Med can return to their respective series one day. 10. Matt Casey. Chicago Fire. Jess Spencer's Matt Casey was arguably the face of Chicago Fire, which is why his exit in Season 10 was so shocking and upsetting. Spencer was one of the original main cast members of the NBC procedural drama, and his character's role at Firehouse 51 made him all the more important. Casey was the lieutenant in charge of Truck 81. His leadership skills defined much of the work ethic among the firefighters, but Casey's time on the show would quickly end during Chicago Fire Season 10, when he moved to Portland, Oregon, to take care of Andrew Darden's sons. Thankfully, Chicago Fire Season 10, Episode 5, wasn't the last time we saw Casey in Chicago. Casey returned for Kelly's Severide and Stella Kidd's wedding in the Season 10 final, and then again towards the end of Season 11 when he came to the city on business. During the Chicago Fire Season 11 finale, Casey proposed to Sylvie Brett, and she said yes. The two married in Season 12 and moved to Portland, leaving the Windy City behind. However, the door remains open for Casey and Brett's return, which, at least in the fictional One Chicago universe, is very plausible once Casey is no longer the Darden boys' guardian. Let's just hope that Spencer is open to reprising his role in Chicago Fire one day, and Kara Kilmer is right beside him when or if he does. Chicago Fire has lost too many characters as of late, and bringing Casey back would be a welcoming gift for many fans. 9. Sylvie Brett. Chicago Fire. Speaking of Brett, Kara Kilmer left Chicago Fire after Casey and Brett's wedding in Season 12, Episode 6. It was a bittersweet goodbye as Casey and Brett finally got their happy ending. But that also meant that viewers had to bid farewell to both characters for the foreseeable future. Even though Kilmer wasn't a part of the original cast of Chicago Fire like Jess Spencer, she was one of the veteran players on the NBC TV series. Brett was introduced as Leslie Shea's replacement in Ambulance 61 in Season 3, and she stuck around Firehouse 51 for almost 10 seasons. I'm still holding out hope that both Brett and Casey can return to Chicago one day and rejoin their family at Firehouse 51. Brett quickly became a fan-favorite character in Chicago Fire as she is easy to love. Her cheerful yet professional personality was perfectly balanced, especially on a show that experienced a lot of heartbreak. So it's safe to say that Brett has been dearly missed since her exit. As mentioned above, though, I'm still holding out hope that both Brett and Casey can return to Chicago one day and rejoin their family at Firehouse 51. Perhaps this is a controversial opinion, but I would love to see Monica Raymond reprise her role as Gabby Dawson in Chicago Fire, especially with Casey and Brett gone. Raymond was among the original Chicago Fire cast members, and her character was one of the best during the early seasons. Of course, everyone knows that Gabby started to go downhill in the episodes leading up to Raymond's exit from the NBC procedural drama. However, a little redemption never killed nobody. It would be intriguing to see Gabby return to Chicago and Firehouse 51 for a bit of a redemption arc in future episodes of Chicago Fire. Now that Casey and Brett are gone, Gabby would have a little more room to breathe on the show. We wouldn't have to worry about a repetitive and agonizing Gabby/Casey/Brett love triangle, and Chicago Fire could just focus on Gabby outside her love life. Raymond's return to Chicago Fire is more like a pipe dream than a reality, but that won't stop me from hoping it will happen. 7 Aaron Lindsay. Chicago PD. Moving on to Chicago PD, the first Chicago Fire spinoff has also lost many actors since its premiere in January 2014. Perhaps Chicago PD's most devastating loss was Sophia Bush as Aaron Lindsay. The actress was among the original cast of the NBC police procedural series, and her character was quite significant because she had ties to several characters. Hank Voight was practically Lindsay's surrogate father. She briefly dated Kelly Severide from Chicago Fire, and Lindsay and Halstead were one of Chicago PD's most interesting couples to root for. Unfortunately, Bush's time on the show had an expiration date. Lindsay had a rough upbringing that evidently carried over to her adulthood. She experienced multiple heartbreaking losses, including the death of Nadia Dakotas in Chicago PD Season 2. Plus, Lindsay's mother's drug addiction continued to weigh heavily on her, so much so that she later accepted a job at the FBI in New York to have charges against her mother dropped during the Season 4 finale. The probability of Bush returning to Chicago PD is almost next to none, but she's undoubtedly among the most missed Chicago characters. 6 Antonio Dawson. Chicago PD. John Seda's Antonio Dawson was among the detectives and officers in the original intelligence unit crew in the cast of Chicago PD Season 1, and he stuck around for 6 seasons before leaving. It's been a long time since we saw Antonio's face in the NBC procedural series, and his return would be exciting. Antonio served as a worthy adversary to Voight regarding their morals, making their dynamic quite entertaining. Unfortunately, it's been difficult to replace Antonio's role regarding his relationship with others in Chicago PD. Perhaps if Gabby, Antonio's sister, returns to Chicago, Antonio can too. Like many others on this list, though, a miracle would likely have to happen to have Gabby and Antonio back in the Chicago universe. However, a 1-episode cameo might be possible. Maybe a lot of actors can return when the Chicago franchise hits 700 episodes, or if it makes it to 1,000 episodes like NCIS. 5 J. Halstead. Chicago PD. Jay Halstead's exit from Chicago PD is probably among the saddest exits in the Chicago franchise. Like Sophia Bush and John Seda, Jesse Lee Soffer was in Chicago PD's original cast and a fan-favorite character from the very beginning. However, Halstead's send-off in Season 10 was quite controversial, and many believe it was a disservice to his character. As a result, it would be ideal if Soffer could reprise his role as Halstead in a future episode or episodes, to give his character the closure he deserves. Unfortunately, Soffer probably won't be returning to Chicago PD anytime soon. Soffer was cast as Wes Mitchell, Scott Forrester's replacement in FBI International Season 4, which will premiere in October 2024. It's more than likely that the actor will be busy with FBI International for a while and won't have time to come back to Chicago PD. But Soffer has admitted that he would be open to returning, which he did in Seasons 10 and 11 as a director. So, anything is possible. 4. Will Halstead. Chicago Med. Jay Halstead's brother, Will Halstead, is another Chicago character who is dearly missed in the franchise. Nick Gelfus left Chicago Med only 1 season ago, but his character's presence is always welcome in the medical drama. Will was an integral member of Chicago Med who had been working at Gaffney Chicago Medical Center since the beginning. Of course, he could be frustrating at times, just like most of the other Chicago Med characters. But it's difficult to accept a reality where Will isn't in the TV series. Will left Gaffney Chicago Medical Center during the Chicago Med Season 8 finale when he handed in his letter of resignation, frustrated with the new policies at the hospital. Gelfa's character then moved to Seattle to reunite with his ex-fiancée, Natalie Manning, and her son, Owen. It was admittedly the perfect ending for both Will and Natalie. However, that won't stop me from hoping the couple returns, even if it's a brief cameo, to Chicago Med. 3 April Sexton. Chicago Med. April Sexton is arguably one of the most underrated characters in Chicago Med, which might be a controversial opinion. However, she deserved a lot better during her time on the NBC medical drama. So, it was probably for the best that April left Chicago Med in Season 6, but selfishly, I want to see her return to the show. It feels like April's story isn't done, and that's probably because it was never given the proper attention it deserved. Yaya. DaCosta claimed she would return to Chicago Med on one condition. April becomes a doctor. Yaya DaCosta got the chance to give closure to April when she returned in Chicago Med Season 8 and married Ethan Choi. Of course, seeing them get a happy ending is fulfilling in and of itself. But we still missed out on actually seeing April and Ethan as a married couple and how their dynamic changes, if at all. The good news is that DaCosta claimed she would return to Chicago Med on one condition. April becomes a doctor. That seems quite manageable to me. To Ethan Choi. Chicago Med. If April returns to Chicago Med, Ethan Choi would have to, as well. And I would welcome the two original series regulars back with open arms. April and Ethan's romance was one of the best in the NBC medical drama, and the TV show is in desperate need of a good romance as Chicago Med heads into its 10th season. Plus, as mentioned above, witnessing April and Ethan's dynamic as a married couple would be very intriguing. Outside his relationship with April, Ethan was a fan-favorite character in Chicago Med. While every other doctor was breaking the rules, Ethan was following them to a T, sometimes to his detriment. Brian T's character was unlike all the others in Chicago Med, and having him back would be like a breath of fresh air. Perhaps Ethan and April take what they have learned from their mobile medical clinic and apply it when they return to Gaffney Chicago Medical Center. 1 Connor Rhodes. Chicago Med. It has been a long time since we have seen Colin Donnell's Connor Rhodes in Chicago Med, which is quite a shame given how beloved he was in the show. Rhodes left Gaffney Chicago Medical Center at the beginning of Season 5 because he wanted a fresh start after Eva Becker's death, and Donnell hasn't reprised his role in a Chicago Med episode ever since. Maybe Rhodes found what he needed during the 5+ years he has been away from the hospital, and he's ready to return in a future episode or 2 or more. It's hard to deny that Chicago Med has gotten progressively worse as the seasons go on, but the return of Rhodes, or Will, April, or Ethan could be just what the TV series needs. Donnell returning as Rhodes in Chicago Med would be quite a surprise, given how long he has been away from the NBC medical drama. However, the actor reprising his role would undoubtedly reinvigorate the show. It's hard to deny that Chicago Med has gotten progressively worse as the seasons go on, but the return of Rhodes, or Will, April, or Ethan could be just what the TV series needs. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe my Fast Gossip 24 to our channel and stay with us.